Thanks, George. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. So when George told me I was going to be first up in the opening keynote, I was kind of excited just because I thought I could get this over with early in the day, right? Like, I'd get it out of the way. So, like, as George mentioned, I've done national TV, I've done national radio, no problem. But when it comes to speaking in front of a crowd, it's nerve-wracking and it's scary. So I just wanted to get this over with. But what I didn't take into account is I flew in last night from California. My body didn't want me to go to sleep until about 4 a.m. your time. And then I had to wake up at 4 a.m. my time, 7 a.m. your time too, to get over here. So I'm operating about 3 hours of sleep. So if I start to lose it or trail off or anything, just start booing or hissing or something, I think that would probably do me good and wake me up. All right, so George already went over some of this already. Just to tell you about myself, I've been in the business for 20 years now, mostly in games media for about 17 and a half of those. From online to print to television, I've done a lot of this stuff before. And I'm creating a new pet project called Going Analog. It's a video show about great tabletop games for video gamers that's coming out a little bit later. And yes, I'm fully aware if you lop a couple of letters off of that, it becomes a totally different show. So try not to think about that when you see that. I'm currently the Senior Partner Alliance Manager at PlayStation. I have a slide later about what that is exactly and why that's relevant to guys like you. So I'll skip over that. But the bottom line is I've seen a lot of pitches along the way. I've seen literally hundreds and hundreds, I could probably easily say thousands of pitches from big game companies, from Electronic Arts and Activision, Ubisoft, and so on, to small independent developers, just one-man teams who's creating a mobile game and trying to get attention. So I've seen a lot of it, and I hope to pass along some of the things I've seen and learned along the way to help you guys. So just by raise a hand, are you guys everyone here a game developer pretty much? Raise a hand. Cool, all right, great. All right. So the problem you're facing with when making a game is just there's way too much noise out there, right? So whether you're talking about iOS, Google Play, Facebook, Nintendo, Xbox, PlayStation, Steam, you're competing with a lot of games out there. So that's what you're dealing with, and you might do this for the love of the art, the love of the craft, but hopefully you can make a living out of this. You can make some money along the way. You have to get your games noticed. So how many people here are making games for mobile? Okay, about half of you. Are you anyone thinking about getting to consoles eventually? A few more of you. Actually, that surprised me. I thought it'd be more mobile, actually. And then how about PC? All right, yeah, that makes sense. Pretty much all of you guys. All right, so now with all that noise out there, how do you get the attention of these guys, the media folk? So, we're talking about mainstream press like Entertainment Weekly or USA Today, consumer or enthusiast press like the Polygons or GameSpots or IGNs of the world, or even tech sites like VentureBeat or TechCrunch and so on. These guys cover video games. And I actually forgot to include this in my slides, but also influencers. That's a really big part of this, like how do you get those PewDiePies and so on, right? So these are all people covering the games very actively. Of course, if you could get to one of them or more of them, you get your game in front of so many more people. Now, more importantly, how do you get these guys' attention? The actual gamers, right? They're the ones who are going to be spending money on your games. So you have your hardcore gamers, you have your casual gamers, everyone in between. So this is the audience you're ultimately going after, and then they're sifting through the same kind of noise that the press is and the influencers are, right? So how do you get to them? And of course, the ultimate consumer, beautiful white people. So all right, so first thing in trying to get your game noticed in the crowd is let's look at your game design, okay? So what's special about it? Does it do anything new or unique? Does it stand out? So you're looking at gameplay. Is your gameplay different? Are you doing another match 3 game? You might have a little trouble standing out. So gameplay, story, are you doing something new in storytelling? The setting, are you doing something interesting or different there? Aesthetic. This is pretty important because that's one of the first things you notice. Like, especially if you go to a trade show and you're just surrounded by a sea of video games, people are going to notice the games that look really cool before the others. So do you have anything memorable? Then your game is marketable. You instantly have an in. Okay, so try to keep that in mind when you're designing your games. I'm not saying don't go make a generic casino slots game or match 3 game, but you'll be doing yourself a lot of favors if you can try to do something new and unique in the market. And this is supposed to be an animated GIF. It was supposed to be, it's super cool looking. It's for Hotline Miami 2, but I don't know why it's not showing up in my slide. All right, so I'm gonna do a quick test and show you guys a few screenshots or a few pieces of art. Can anyone tell me what game this is? Just shout it out. Limbo. There you go. All right. How about this one? Great. I was worried this might not work, actually. Everyone just stare at me and like, I don't know. How about this one? Okay. Not as many there, but yeah, you guys got it. So the point is all these games are doing something kind of unique or different. Like Limbo is a classic example. Let me go back to that real quick. I remember seeing this at E3, the Entertainment Expo, Electronic Entertainment Expo, a few years ago. This is back in the mid-2000s, I think. And then I was just doing a quick scan of like last-minute games. I had like about an hour or two left in the show, and I was just running through the show floor trying to catch whatever I can. And then I just stopped as soon as I hit this game because it looks so interesting. Visually arresting, had a very different look to it. You know, we've since seen a lot of games that kind of copy this sort of aesthetic, but the point is, it's like, yeah, it caught my attention, and instantly all of these games that I just mentioned here are marketable because of whatever they're doing on the aesthetic side or storytelling or gameplay. So this is a great quote from Jonathan Blow. I'm sure some of you guys know him as the creator of Braid or Witness. Don't waste the press's time with shitty copycat games, right? Again, that's I might keep bringing this up. Bless you. I might keep bringing this up. There's a lot of match 3 games out there, a lot of casino slot games out there. If you're going to do the same thing that a lot of people have done before you, and you have a lot of trouble getting your game noticed, well, you know what you're getting into. So from a branding perspective, what are you calling your game? You know, is your game going to be something kind of interesting? If it's called Vegas slots, casino slots, again, you might have trouble standing out in this crowd. What does your logo look like? You know, that's something to think about as well. A lot of you guys are probably really talented in terms of game design, in terms of programming, and you might not be thinking about it from a graphic artist perspective. You know, get some help there. There's a lot of people, you could find some people to help you out who are artists, who are graphic designers, who can help you come up with something a little bit more interesting than you might yourself. So the key is, will people remember either of these two things? You know, will they remember the name of your game after they hear about it? Will they remember your logo after seeing it? And one of the key things is to do a lot of focus testing. You know, run this by your friends, run this by your family, give them a few options to look at to see, hey, which one sticks out to you? Which one is the one that you'll remember? If you're going the Kickstarter route, you know, we see a lot of Kickstarters will go out and say, hey, like they'll ask their backers, they'll ask their fans, hey, take a look at option A, option B, what do you guys like better? Now the risk there is the more public you make it, the more you can have a chance of someone maybe stealing one of your ideas, so be careful there. But definitely do some focus testing, get some feedback. A lot of times you're working in your own world, in your own bubble, and you kind of forget what other people might think of whatever it is you're working on. So I want to show you some great names and logos that I've seen that I think have caught my eye, and I probably catch your eyes. So Orion Dino Beatdown. I've never played this game. I actually don't know what it is, but I remember this logo from a few years ago. I saw it on Steam. Why I like it, Orion part's a little generic, but Dino Beatdown, like it kind of conjures up images in your head, right? You're like, all right, I'm going to beat down some dinosaurs. That's kind of cool on some level. It makes you kind of curious, or you might want to check it out. So that's the key to this being a great logo or a great name of a game here. Enter the Gungeon. This is a game that just came out. Again, like you get the idea, like you know you're entering a dungeon, you know it's a dungeon crawler of some sort, but with guns. So that's a great twist, and it's a very memorable title. Scoregasm. It's another game. This is a few years old. I saw this on Steam. I don't know what it actually is. I imagine it's some shoot 'em up. Again, it might kind of conjure up images, hopefully clean and not too gross. But you know, it's interesting. It's an interesting game, and it's pretty memorable. Salt and Sanctuary. Now, from this one, unlike the others, you might not have an idea of what game this is. But if you ever saw the game, and it has a little bit of that sort of monochromatic Limbo style to it, but if you saw the game and then you'd heard it's called Salt and Sanctuary, you probably won't forget that name because it's a very unique, different name. Type Fighters. Now, hopefully, I don't know if you guys could see this because it's a very plain logo with a really boring Arial font of some sort. But if looking at that logo, instantly you're probably curious, like, what is this game? It's something to do with typing. I'm going to fight using my keyboard. So it's interesting. It kind of tells you what the game's about. At the same time, it kind of makes you curious. It piques your curiosity. Breach and Clear. This is Wes Keltner here? I think he's going to be here later today. All right. So this is a local product, and what I like about it is it's very clear, concise, and simple. You know what you're getting into. If Rainbow Six weren't a franchise, I would say this is a better name for a game, for a new IP than Rainbow Six is, if that weren't a thing, a Tom Clancy thing. So you look at that, you get an idea of what the game is. So that's a really smart logo, smart name of the game. Piggy Ball. Hey, I was wondering if Nathan was going to be here today. So this game, very catchy title, very simple. You're probably going to remember. We just talked about this last night. I talked about this with John Meister on the way in. So I thought, hey, this is actually a really clever logo, clever name. You're going to remember that. But I do want to give Nathan a hard time for this because in today's day of cultural and societal sensitivities, he's now putting a naked woman on his logo. So, that's ballsy. Takes a lot of balls to do something like that, but all the more power to you. All right, so let's look at you as a developer. Now, we're marketing you, right? If you're going to go out and talk to press, you're going to talk to influencers, you're going to get interviewed by people. Are you a visionary? Like some people dream big, they talk big. Whether or not those things come to fruition, that's another story. But you're interesting to talk to. The press loves talking to these guys. Are you personable? Are you interesting? Are you funny? Are you quotable? Bottom line, do you smell okay? It's important as well. You don't want people talking about your smell. Bottom line is, are you marketable as a developer? So it's something a lot of people don't really think about. They think, okay, I make a good game, my game will speak for itself. But at the same time, the press will want to talk to you, get a little bit idea of what you're going after, what you're dreaming of, what your goals are, what your ambitions are. So the more marketable you are as an individual or as your team, as a representative for your team, the better. Now, if you're working as a team rather than just individually, I would always recommend that there's one spokesperson, one regular person that talks to. If you get into everything I'm talking about here and you get to talk to media, it's better to have one person that people start to remember. They learn your name. You're always present in interviews. So, it's a hard thing because a lot of team members, if you're part of a studio or part of a tight-knit team, you want to make sure everyone gets credit and everyone gets their sort of time to shine. That's great. It's a noble cause, but I would recommend if there's one person, find your best smelling person on their team to go out and do all that talking and do that sort of front-facing promotion with the press and media. All right. Now, if you have some money, if you're independently wealthy or maybe you have some good backers or your parents are helping out here, one of the things that you can do to help your game out is to hire a PR firm. There are a lot of dedicated PR agencies out there who just focus on gaming, right? So I could name a million of them right now. A lot of them now are more and more indie friendly. They're not just focused on big companies. A lot of them will take on a small independent developer. And then so these guys, they know the press and they know the influencers. Like they know how to reach out to them. They know how to contact them. They already have established relationships with these guys, including influencers. Now this is a new thing that PR agencies are tackling. I'm working with a few of them now through PlayStation, and it's great because they know, like, okay, we know how to get these guys. These guys are going to stream the game at this time. These guys are going to produce videos at this time. These guys are going to do a review here. So they line all that stuff up for you so you could be a little bit more hands-off and just kind of work with them and let them handle it. If you don't want to do all the work and you have some money, that's one option. Another cheaper option is a PR consultant or freelancer. Okay, you don't have to necessarily go hire a big agency to market your game, but you might find an individual who either someone who wants to break into the business, someone's a little bit maybe getting started, or there's a lot of people who are industry veterans who are just doing this on their own and they're just picking up clients one at a time. So these people can help as well. So the kind of advantage with the second option is you get more one-on-one attention. You know, you're not dealing with an agency who's also dealing with a million other games or other clients. So this way you could get a little bit more attention and they're out there selling your game. Now, a key point to all of this, however, is the PR person or this marketing or PR agency that's working with you, they should like you and your game, okay? Because we can see, I say we, like I'm not actively in press anymore, but the press can see through a hollow pitch, right? We've all seen pitches where you can tell the person isn't really buying what they're selling. They don't really believe in a product and they're just going through the motions. It's very easy to spot, it's very easy to see, but if they love your game, they love you, and they just want to go to bat for you, that's so much more important. Because a lot of these people, like, I don't know how many of you here have experience working with PR people, but a lot of them actually, they're gamers. They know the industry, they know the business, they play games themselves. So when they get behind something and they're like, man, this game is really awesome, you need to check it out, the press person that they're pitching to, the journalist, is more likely to listen because they know, all right, this guy's being authentic, they know what they're talking about, they know what I like, therefore he's probably pitching me something that's relevant to me. So that's really important. Okay, so make sure you find that right fit if you do go this route. All right, partnerships. So this is what I do at PlayStation right now. Another way to get your game noticed is to form a co-marketing relationship or partnership with a platform holder. So this could be Xbox, PlayStation, Apple, Google. So all of these companies have departments that will go out and form partnerships. So they'll find an exclusive and then they'll offer them things which will give you huge exposure to your primary audience. So if you're saying, if you're like, I want to develop on PlayStation or I want to develop for iOS, and you get in, it's not easy to do. This is not something that's just open to everybody. But if you have a great enough product, this is out there. This is one of the options, okay? So you get huge exposure to that primary audience for that platform. Oops, sorry. So this can get you potential preferred placement on digital and physical storefronts. So when you go to the App Store or to the PSN Store, etc., your game could have more valuable store merchandising and placement in those spots. You could get placement at events. So at E3, I'm sure you guys have all seen giant booths where there's demos on the show floor, kiosks on the show floor, or when you see trailers in a keynote or anything like that. A lot of those are prioritized based on the partnerships that they want to go after, the games that the platform holder is most excited about. Then you have the web. So this could be a blog, like the PlayStation has a huge blog where they write up about a lot of the games that we partner up with. There's also like Xbox.com, PlayStation.com, etc. Newsletters. So these are direct emails that go out directly to consumers. They're usually targeted, so behind the scenes, these big companies are gathering info about their audience and consumers, and they're making sure they're sending them relevant products to promote. So that's always key. And then some of these companies also can provide funding options. This is again, I'm not saying that this is going to be widely available, that everyone could get in on this, but that is an option. If they like your game enough and you're in a situation where you need money, there's sometimes these companies will provide some funds to help get your game off the ground. So now, usually the trade-off is there's going to be some exclusivity required. They're not just doing this just to make sure that you guys are taking care of it to get the exposure. They want to make sure that they maintain a competitive advantage. So the reason why these platform holders would even partner up with your game is because they see some value in it. They like it. They think it's good for the platform. It's good for their audience. And they want to keep it to themselves. So it's rarely nowadays a lifetime exclusive, but it might be something like, okay, you could come to our platform first for 3 months or 6 months, and then you can release to competing platforms. It's usually a relationship or a business relationship like that. And excuse me, sometimes you'll find a platform holder will be pretty friendly to your needs. Like I can't speak for Xbox or Nintendo, but I know at PlayStation, we consider Microsoft as our primary competitor, but not the PC necessarily. So if you were like, okay, you know what, I really need to make sure I sell a lot of copies, I want to come out on PC as well, usually PlayStation will kind of work with you on things like that just to make sure that you can make a little bit more money than if you were just sticking to PlayStation on its own. All right, now, assuming you don't have money, you don't have these connections, and you're just starting off and maybe it's not something big enough to get on the radar of a giant platform holder and you're just going this by yourself, contact people. So email, social media, there's a lot of ways to reach out to influencers, to whether that's a YouTube personality, a Twitch personality, or someone in the media. Reach out to them. The Jonathan Blow, again, used him a couple times in this deck, creator of Braided Witness. He famously told developers, I think it was at a GDC a few years ago, that he only initially for Braid. How many people know Braid here? All right, cool. Braid, really famous indie games, one of the first sort of really huge breakout indie games of last generation. He only emailed a few people, and then the ball started rolling. People got excited. A few important people in the press liked the game, got behind it, started writing articles. Then other press people started seeing those articles, wanting to know what this is about. Then people wanted to see it at trade shows, and then it just became a snowball effect from there. So he only contacted a few people, but he did that. Like, this is a guy who he's a creator through and through. He's not a marketer per se. He's not a PR guy, but he knows the value of having to do this outreach himself. He just did the work, contacted a few people, and then Braid blew up because of it. So when you're contacting press, look for tips email addresses. There's a lot of press outlets would prefer you write to their general inbox. The problem there is, you're sending an email to a general inbox. Your email might get kind of lost in there, but I'm going to talk about that shortly, a little bit more about what to craft for that email. But if it's available, even better, contact individual journalists, right? A lot of websites will have, you can reach out to the individual editor, whether it's through Twitter or whether it's just a direct email. If you could find that person and directly contact that person, that's much better. Oops. So now the key is you don't want to just spam people, right? It's not effective. People get a lot of emails. You want to read the stories. Like, let's say you're going after a journalist and you want them to write about your game. Read their stories, scan their social media, see what they like, see what their interests are, okay? So I'll give you a couple of examples where this has been really effective in my personal experience. Where they targeted and personalized their outreach. So I did a story about this tower defense game called Field Runners 2. Actually, I think it's a roundup of tower defense games I liked, and then in the article I expressed that I'm a big fan of tower defense games. So the people who made Kingdom Rush saw that, reached out to me and said, hey, we hear your tower defense game. Can we meet with you at E3 and let's show you this game called Kingdom Rush. At the time, Kingdom Rush hadn't been released yet. It was brand new. I said, yeah, I'll give you guys half hour. We actually met in the hallway. We sat down on the floor because these guys didn't have a booth. They pulled out their tablet, showed me the game, and I fell in love, wrote an article about it, and been following the series ever since, played through them multiple times. But these guys were paying attention and made sure that they went after me, knowing that I was the right fit for their game. Here's another example. So I used to work at a website called GamesBeat / VentureBeat, and I did this little test where this little exercise called Pitch Us in One Tweet. And this is specifically just to help indie developers, where we just blasted this out on social media and said, you have 140 characters, pitch us your game, and we'll take our top 10 favorite pitches and give you an article. And then this is just to kind of get people thinking about how do they sell their game, how do they market this game. So my favorite one, my pick from this initial group was a game called Oh Snap. It's sort of like a draw something, but you use a real photo from your phone as sort of the backdrop, and you draw on top of it. So this is me. And then the guy saw that I went to the University of Michigan, and I'm a big Michigan football fan. So he took this picture of the clue for helmet, drew a helmet on me, wrote Go Wolverines on it, and then sent that to me, tweeted that at me as part of the pitch for this exercise. Instantly got my attention. He knew who I was. He knew what was going to grab my eye. He knew what was going to get my attention, and then I picked him for this contest. But even outside of the context of this contest, I probably would have written about it anyways, just because it was an interesting game. It was a cool idea at the time. Draw something was a really hot item. It's a while ago, of course, but yeah, very cool idea, very smart pitch from this developer. So now, I used to be a writer. I used to write a lot, so I kind of think in terms of a writer, in terms of what catches people's eyes. So when you're sending out emails, remember, just like a story needs a good headline and a good intro, your email should as well. That means your subject head better be catchy, okay? your subject head better be catchy, and the first 2 lines of your email better grab that guy's attention, because if you don't, and you just go into something boring that they're not interested in, next, we're talking about hundreds of emails that you're getting each week. You don't have time to read them all and give each one all of your attention. So this is one of my favorite subject lines. Someone emailed me, they named a famous developer in here. I'm not gonna name him here, but it just says blank is wrong, right? And then I'm like, well, what does this mean? Like, I had to read to see what this guy was talking about. And basically, this developer, the famous developer who was in a subject line here in the blank spot, had a quote out there in the press. He said something about the industry, and this guy wanted to refute those claims. And he used that as sort of his in to talk to me about his game, whatever he was pitching at the time. So I thought that was a really clever way of getting my attention by calling out someone else who was really famous. This is really nothing to do with games, but this is another subject head I liked. Don't let a 23-year-old run your social media. You can kind of see, this is a subject head to an email, so you can kind of see it sort of reads like a catchy headline, like a clickbaity headline, right? So another way someone got my attention there. Now, think of it as online dating, right? And the press or the influencer is a hot girl, right? They're like getting hundreds and hundreds of emails. So what do you do to kind of stand out? You have to make your email count. You have to make that first contact really noticeable. Like, you get your one chance to make that great impression. And then if you don't, they're ready to move on to the next thing. Okay. And don't assume that they know your game. No matter how many times you've contacted them in the past, if you've maybe done press releases or you've had good showings at conventions, don't assume like, oh yeah, my game's out there, they know what it is, and they're all aware. So I received this as a headline or as an email once that, hey, my game, the name of the game is live. I've never heard of this game before. Or at least I didn't remember it at the time, and it just was not interesting to me. It didn't really catch my eye or get my attention. So don't get too caught up in your own world and realize that there's a lot of people out there looking at a lot of things. All right. So in the email, avoid boring form letters. This should go without saying, but it's really easy to spot a form letter of just a generic mass spam, and they're much easier to ignore. Make sure you personalize it. Now, a lot of companies now use Gmail even as an enterprise solution. So embed screenshots and link short YouTube videos, because what happens is if you guys use Gmail, like the videos will embed right in that email itself. So it's a quick, easy button to press. Now, I love getting YouTube pitches, like short 30-second, minute-long videos, because it's much easier to kind of visualize what the game's about and get excited about a game. You can see it in action. And you can do this via GIFs, like I said, for short videos. But I like YouTube just because so many companies use Gmail now that you want that video button right in there. And logos. If you have a cool, interesting logo, remember what we talked about 7 slides ago. If you have that, go ahead and throw that in there. If it's not that great, don't use that real estate to promote your logo when you can be promoting a really cool, action-packed screenshot instead. A few final tips on pitching. Pitch big picture stories or roundups that include you or the game studio. So maybe your game, maybe you're realistic, right? And saying, all right, my game maybe is too small, is kind of off the radar. Maybe it's going to be really difficult to pitch my game for a dedicated article from the press. But you could think of bigger trends or roundups that can include your game as part of something bigger, okay? So that doesn't mean that they're gonna end up writing about just your game. They might include your game in something bigger. So let's say you want to do a game about, it's a Pac-Man clone, right, called Piggy Ball. So I'm gonna use you as an example again, Nathan, but let's say you wanna do a Pac-Man style game, and you take a look out there and you search for Pac-Man clones, and you find out like, oh, holy shit, there's a lot of them, okay? So all over the place, people are doing their own kind of take on Pac-Man. So now your game becomes maybe that much more difficult to pitch, but now the idea here, my point is, what if you approach the press person as saying, hey, you know what, there's a lot of great Pac-Man games out there that are not Pac-Man itself. What if you did a roundup? If someone pitched me that, I actually probably would have done that. So it was a really great idea to look at alternative Pac-Man games, and then now your game can be included and shoved into that. And in fact, that was an article. So there was an actual, this is how I found a lot of these pictures. There was an actual article about the best Pac-Man clones and spin-offs. So that's one way to do it. Another example that I just came up with, so I was writing, John Meister was kind enough to pick me up from the airport last night. He was telling me about this new virtual reality product that his group is working on that helps people train in virtual reality to use defibrillators. So I thought, that's really cool, as maybe that's not, that may or may not be a product that a company might want to write about or an outlet might want to write about. But if taking that lesson that I just spoke of, if they were doing a bigger roundup of like, hey, alternative ways virtual reality is helping out the medical field, or different ways that people are getting educated through VR, this could be, your product could now be a part of that pitch as something bigger that does become interesting, right? Because you try to think of it this way, like the media outlet, the press, the influencers, all these guys, they're just thinking about clicks and views. That's when they're evaluating whether to write about your game, that's what they want to know, is like, is it worth my time to spend X many hours to play your game, to write about your game, to talk to you, put that out there, how many people are going to end up clicking on it, versus if I spent that time elsewhere getting more clicks or whatever. So that's why, again, if your game itself might not accomplish that on its own, but these sort of bigger picture stories might be the way in for you. All right. So when you're talking to the people you're pitching, educate them and make sure you make them understand why the game is a big deal for them, okay, for their readers and viewers, not from your perspective, okay? It's why it matters to them, why can they make an interesting story that they can make for their readers. It's not about you. It's not about your partner and what they want to communicate. It's not even about, if you have marketing guys on your team, it's not about what they're trying to accomplish. It's not about what your investors want and what your CEOs want. It's about what's important to the audience that you're pitching to. So I see this a lot. I talk to a lot of PR people who they're constantly pulling their hair and they're just going crazy because they'll pitch something to the press. The press will kind of take their own angle with it and run it the way they want to run it, and then the CEO will call the PR person and complain and say, "Why did they write about this? Why didn't they write about this?" And the PR person is sort of stuck in the middle trying to explain, I can't tell these people what to write. I can only pitch them. That's the proper way to do PR, is not to try to pressure the press or influencers to cover the game the way they want them to. They let them go at it, let them do their own thing, and they just present the opportunity. So just keep that in mind. Now, another way to sort of go at it is just remember, personal stories can be really good. If you have a story where a 9-year-old is coding a complete game and it's a really awesome game, that's a great, interesting story. So, if you're something about your friends or family reactions, that can mean much more than fancy stats. At the same time, stats can be really good too. It depends who you're pitching. If you're pitching to a group like VentureBeat or TechCrunch, they might be more interested. Like if your story was like, hey, I hired 100 9-year-olds to play this game or to develop this game, that's an interesting story. So that could be really cool. Just think about who you're pitching to and what's interesting for them. All right. So now, all else fails, some final tips, you could get a tweet out of some of your key influencers, okay? So if it's even, I've done this before where it's just, I'm too busy, maybe I felt like the game wasn't like really worth a full article, I just didn't have the bandwidth to write 600 words and do all the work for this particular game, but sometimes like, you know what, it's still interesting, I want to tell my audience about it, and tell my followers about it, I'll tweet it out. If you get that, fantastic. Social media is a perfectly fine, valid way to reach a lot of people. You don't necessarily need a huge article about your game. And then now you have a quote that you can use for whatever else you need. If you need to do like a accolades sort of piece of marketing material, or you just want to put that in future press releases or future outreach, you're like, hey, look, so-and-so said this about my game. Tweets are great. You could do giveaways and contests, right? There's a lot of tools out there now where you can have, if you start to build a community, you have some followers, you have some fans, and then you could get them to spread the word for you virally, great. And then so there's a lot of these things, I'm not sure what they're called, but you might have seen them before, where it's like, hey, you could get 10 entries into this contest, and the contest is up to you, but it's like, if you tweet about this, here's one entry. If you like this on Facebook, here's another entry, and so on. A lot of tools like that kind of simplify it. Doesn't have to be anything that fancy. You could just offer this stuff yourself. Because if you give a few codes away, like if you have voucher codes from Steam or whatever, you're giving away these, that's really free marketing. It can buy you coverage. There's a lot of outlets who, if you told them like, hey, I want to give 100 keys to your audience, what can we do? They'll give you an article. They love that idea. They want to give stuff away to their readers, and then now all of a sudden they're writing about your game and communicating that to their audience. Other ways you can reach out to people, there are community sites out there, fan sites, message boards. Another way you can pitch something is a guest post. If you're like what I was describing those developers earlier in the presentation, if you are a visionary, if you are someone kind of established, or you've done really cool things and you know things, you could pitch a guest post. A lot of websites, you probably hear, the demise of media. It's a really tough business out there. If they can take a free article that'll get some hits, great. So if you are, like, hey, I'm a studio head and I've hired 100 9-year-olds to make a game. Let me write a guest post for you talking about what it's like employing a bunch of little rugrats. Someone might pick that up and let you write a post in where you can say, hey, this is, you got to make sure that article isn't too markety, isn't too self-serving. But if it's an interesting article to them and you're writing about your perspective as a developer or your views on industry, et cetera, or your views on a particular hot topic in the business, and then you find a way to work your game into that, great, you got yourself a plug. All right. Finally, I'm going to leave you with this. This is a great quote from Chris Hecker. He's another independent developer for a Spy Party. It's like, marketing is part of making the game. You have to be good at it, and you have to know how to talk about your game. It's very important because, again, I've talked to a million indie developers. Marketing is really the furthest thing from their mind, and then it just becomes an afterthought. Think about it, plan for it, work that into everything that you're doing for your game, and you'll get a lot out of it, and hopefully sell a lot, make some money, and you can continue to do this for a long time. Thank you.